So I'm going to talk a little bit about my ideas of how I approached the play to begin with, and then I'm going to invite Hildegard and Michael to join the chat and share their memories and experiences of this amazing process. Well, Antony and Cleopatra was last staged at the National Theatre with Alan Rickman and Helen Mirren about 20 years before we thought about our production. And the idea of doing it came out of, in fact, a dialogue that I had between myself and Ray Fiennes. I had directed Ray in Man and Superman at the National Theatre, and he and I were talking about what the next great part would be. And Ray had actually seen Anthony Hopkins play Antony for Peter Hall, also in the Olivier, where Judi Dench was Cleopatra, and Rafe had always remembered that production and that performance, and had been very curious about tackling Antony one day. And we thought maybe this was the moment to do it. So we approached Sophie Okonedo, and she agreed to be Cleopatra, and then all the rest of the company joined, and off we went. Now, of course, the play is huge. It has, I think, 40 scenes. It crosses continents, worlds. There are battles. There's Egypt, there's Rome. And it was a huge undertaking to work out how to make those worlds live. One of the first things that I did was to, in fact, make a trip to Egypt. And I discovered that the Egypt of the real Egypt today is quite different from the Egypt in Shakespeare's imagination. Yet it was good, just being in the heat and the light and the sand. And I took some photographs and I had some experiences, and I took all those back to see Hildegard, and we started off our journey with some meetings. But Hildegard, yeah, where can you remember we started from? What was our starting point, as you recall it?
We started probably a year before we actually got on stage, and it was quite a long run-in time. We both had very busy diaries, and one of the things I asked you, and you agreed, is that we could sort of meet regularly over this whole period and have conversations, so that the usual deadline wasn't applied to this job, that we could have more dream time, so to speak, and we could take it without pressure, actually.
And then I suppose for us from the beginning as well, you also were very clear on contrasts, that if Egypt was earthy and in fact let us have a swimming pool in the end, visceral water, then Rome was very much, as I recall, marble. Is that right?
Yeah.
Some of your
it's much colder. It was colder, and it was closely related to power somehow, because we ended up with these objects on plinths, which originally we thought were sort of trophy-like art brought back, but in fact it became slightly more abstract. But the material of the very pale, almost white marble world of Rome was very contrasting with the colourful green tiled watercolour costumes, very different, of course, in Egypt. And the heat and the dust is what we wanted to bring into it.
Michael, so if that was how we began our visual language and our journey, tell us a little bit about how you felt embarking on how to find the music of Antony and Cleopatra.
Well, I think for me, one of the things I've learned about that space of the Olivier is how vast it is and how epic. And with the play, with this sweep to it, I felt like boldness in that space is sort of rewarded. I feel like you want to really embrace the scale of it. So for me, it was about how to fill the space with sound. And we have a 5-piece live band that play the score. And so it was about how best to sign those roles. And I decided quite early on that I thought percussion was a way to give us an epic scale, and it can be sort of really interesting and really dynamic and different with the worlds of Rome and Egypt. And of course, I got all those references the visual references that you had early on, and we met before rehearsals started. But as is normal on a play like this, the music isn't written until rehearsals are well underway. So I'm very much in the rehearsal room trying to feel out where the production is going with the actors and the different design departments and all the technology that goes into it to try and work out where the music fits within the palette of all those things that happen at once. So for me, it was about how to differentiate the worlds of Rome and Egypt. And I think Rome was quite clear to me. It felt very sort of clinical and metric and quite military. And so I sort of lent into Western percussion instruments, a lot of snare drums, sort of really crisp and clean, quite cold sounds. And then obviously we open up the world of Egypt, and then what was great was I got the opportunity to work with this our musical director, Magnus Mehta, who's an expert in loads of different percussion from all around the world, but specifically like the Middle East, and he's traveled lots to North Africa and studied lots of percussion instruments in all these different places, and has a treasure trove of them in his house. And right at the beginning of rehearsals, I went round and he literally just pulled out instrument after instrument and said, so this sounds like this, and this rhythm is this. And it was really great to be able to have someone with that knowledge to sort of work with and collaborate through the process.
That's
so that it
great.
wasn't, it was, you know, he had a very big part of input into how all of it functioned in the end.
Into these worlds. And Hildegard, and Michael, maybe we'll talk now about a couple of moments in the show itself that combine music and set in a very particular way. One of them was in the text. It's Pompey's ship, a ship where Pompey, who's one of the Roman generals, has a party to celebrate a peace treaty between him and Antony and Caesar. And they have a party and a dance, and it's a kind of bacchanalian scene on this deck of a boat. Hildegard, it was a challenging scene to work out, not least because a boat on stage is never easy, particularly in the Olivier, particularly having to have this big dance and this drama and a feeling of kind of anarchy on it. So talk us through your memories, Hildegard, of how we got to what we did.
By having used half of a very large revolve, most of the floor space, in the first half of the play for Egypt, we had this water world. We then ran out of options how, in a way, a boat would be suddenly coming from where and how. So we knew that we wouldn't overdo this beautifully used in many productions, this feature of the Olivier drum revolve, where you could take scenery down or up. It takes a couple of minutes, I think, and then that's the worry, because you can't, if you're watching it, you don't really want to stop the play to watch something technical happen. But we had decided the boat would come up in one form or other, because it suits it coming out of the ground, coming, so from the depths of the sea, the drum revolve, and we struggled with it because we were very literal about the need for the action. For the coming onto the deck, going up, being in this space, having a rowdy party. We wanted to create a space that allowed all that. And I think I did throw out a very advanced sketch suddenly one day, because I thought it'd be rather wonderful if we could really surprise the arrival of the boat with a almost abstract shape that would then do the trick of getting us into the belly of the ship. And so it's like having a fin, a shark fin or something coming out. It was in the end metal, and it came around. The drum revolve allowed it to come out rather spectacularly, and people seem to remember the arrival.
Totally, I feel it's still with me in dreams. I'll never forget it. Actually, an abstract shape arriving and using the technology of the stage, which essentially led us to it being a submarine. And we never knew it was going to be a submarine until it came out.
And the music was a fantastic, in helping that become very heightened, actually. And the music helped that transition so beautifully that when we did have actors come across the space, lined up, and got dressed, how did the dressing go? I can't remember how. They got dressed into their
military kind of uniform, which again, John Goddard, the great movement director, helped us to do it in such a kind of deliberate and exciting way with Michael's music that hopefully the audience never realised that actually this was just covering a scene change, but it was, it sort of became a scene in its own right.
Actually, for me, in that middle of that dressing moment, there's a bit that I'm actually really pleased with in hindsight, watching it back. I mean, in the theatre, that's the thing about music for plays. Like in the theatre, it's one thing. Watching on the screen at home is wonderful, but it doesn't quite give you the same epic nature of the moment. But there was a bit in the middle where they were dressing, and I'd run out of music. I knew I had to fill more time. And I had these two percussionists play on opposite sides. So you can't see them on the stage, but they're on these side platforms. So they're in view of the audience in the theatre. And they were playing these snare drum, this sort of solo, but it was a duet between these two drummers. And it was like a real moment of virtuosic playing from them that really helped to catapult us into that next phase where the ship was about to come up. And I was pleased because that was at the time written as a sort of cover, and then I went, this feels like it's successful.
Well, sometimes accidents pay off.
I did put to use at the Olivier, which I hadn't seen before, and it mattered to me that we didn't look up at the lighting grid, that we didn't have this cavernous space that was also very high. I wanted to have a sort of pressure lid on the whole production to scale it down in a way, make it less operatic.
Yeah, what's brilliant, Hildegard, is that you also made it into a cinema screen in the sense that it's hard to tell when you watch the video, but the filming of it, but you had created actually a black kind of
an angled piece went right across this whole space.
Brilliant.
And it basically didn't show you where the lights were coming from.
Yeah.
And so you could kind of, I mean, it was beautifully lit.
Yes,
and very fast, because there was an awful lot of scenes to get through in the technical rehearsal. It was fantastic.
Well, Hildegard and Michael, thank you. And certainly I am feeling enormous gratitude to both of you, and indeed to the whole creative team, and to the extraordinary company of actors who came together with such heroism and skill and collaboration to make a production of Antony Cleopatra, which inevitably with a play of that size, it's only done once in a generation. And I'm so glad that we were all part of it, and to work with both of you and with everyone on making a production that I think people will really take something from, and I hope is in homage to the great spirit of Shakespeare, who's still so strongly with us all. So a big shout out to Shakespeare as well. Thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you, Hildegard. Thank you, Mike.